trusted name in news.
Hello, I'm Wolf Blitzer. It's 1 p.m. here in Washington. Wherever you're watching from around the world, thanks very much for joining us. Up first, the president and his press secretary, they're back in the public spotlight today. The White House briefing is set to get underway this hour. You're looking at the live pictures coming in from the White House briefing room. The press secretary, Sean Spicer, will be taking reporters' questions in his first on-camera briefing in more than a week. We're going to bring that to you live. President Trump, meanwhile, he was out of the public eye for several days, but we saw him earlier today actually greeting guests on a tour of the White House. So we'll see him in two other events later today. He leads a meeting of House members and then meets with AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka. President Trump's explosive and unsubstantiated wiretap claims and the Republican plan to replace Obamacare, just two of the issues the press secretary, Sean Spicer, will no doubt be questioned about this hour. Let's go to our senior White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, and our senior congressional reporter, Manu Raju. They're both up on Capitol Hill. Actually, Jim Acosta is not on Capitol Hill. He's over at the White House. Jim, right. Spicer was asked about President Trump's allegation that President Obama tapped his phones. He didn't provide any evidence at all, but said, quote, "There's no question that something happened." What more are we hearing from the White House?
As of this point, Wolf, nothing. We are hearing no new information, no new proof, no new evidence from this White House to back up the president's claim that he tweeted over the weekend that somehow former President Obama orchestrated the tapping of his phones up at Trump Tower. And so at this point, it is still something that the president is claiming happened without any proof. And at this point, the White House is not offering any additional proof. Now, Mike Pence, the vice president, was asked about this earlier this morning on a radio program. Here's a bit of that.
I think the president's tweet speaks for itself. He's expressed himself on it. And, we're very pleased that the congressional committees have made it clear that they will look into that matter just as they're looking into every aspect of it.
Now, of course, coming up in just about half an hour from now is the first on-camera White House briefing that we've had in a week, Wolf. Yesterday, the White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, held a briefing. It was off-camera. That goes along with some off-camera briefings that we had last week, although we should point out the press secretary did a round robin of on-camera interviews with reporters, so he was taking many of the same questions that he would have taken in the briefing room. But this is a part of that Washington theater, I guess you could say, Wolf, that we have not really had a chance to look at in some time, and it's going to be a chance for just about everybody in that room to press the White House press secretary for some kind of proof, some kind of evidence to back up what the president tweeted over the weekend. But as we heard from the vice president in that radio interview earlier this morning, there's a lot of attention being paid to the Obamacare repeal and replace proposal that was put up on Capitol Hill. And so I imagine that the White House press secretary will be spending a lot of time talking about that, promoting that. The president tweeted about it this morning. And the vice president also indicated that he's somewhat on board as well. Of course, all of these details still need to be worked out. The House health care plan has not obviously been rectified on the Senate side, and so they have a long way to go.
They have a really long way to go. Manu, you spoke with Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas, one of the Republican leaders in the Senate. He's also a member of the Intelligence Committee. What is he saying about the wiretap claims by the president?
Well, he doesn't know whether to believe the president of the United States. I asked him that directly. Do you believe the president of the United States? He said this is going to be part of the Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation, which is a bit of news that's going further than what the Senate Intelligence Committee has said. Here's a little bit of our exchange, Wolf.
The bipartisan investigation is well underway, and the CIA has produced a massive amount of classified materials for members of the select committee to review.
And that was the purpose of your meeting there yesterday?
Well, I was there for other reasons, but that was part of it, yeah.
And have you, as part of that, seen the Flynn transcripts with him and the Russian ambassador?
I haven't seen that.
You guys been briefed on that as a committee?
Well, Manu, I can't really talk about things that are classified, and so I can't answer that question. But what I can assure you is that Vice Chairman Warner, a Democrat, and Chairman Burr, a Republican, have committed to a bipartisan investigation which will be thorough and will follow the facts wherever they may lead. That's all I think anybody can reasonably ask for.
Will you also look into this allegation of wiretapping him, the president being wiretapped by President Obama?
I think all of that is part of the investigation.
Do you believe the president when he says that?
Well, like I said, it needs an investigation so we can find out what the facts are. So we'll follow the facts wherever they may lead.
So interesting to hear a top Republican leader not able to say, Wolf, whether or not he believes the president of his own party by making such an eyebrow-raising, stunning accusation against his predecessor for wiretapping him. But interesting also that the committee plans to look into this. That is something that the House Intelligence Committee also plans to look into. Devin Nunes, the Republican chairman of that committee, announcing over the weekend that he would look into the White House's allegation of Obama wiretapping the president of the United States. But one thing that we do know, Wolf, is that the Senate Intelligence Committee now going through a lot of data handed over by the CIA looking into this issue, but also interesting that John Cornyn has not seen those transcripts between Michael Flynn and the Russian ambassador that led to Michael Flynn's resignation from that post as National Security Advisor during that time, discussing possibly the issue of sanctions, right as the President of the United States, Barack Obama at the time, was imposing those new sanctions, although part of that larger investigation taking shape here on Capitol Hill, Wolf.
Yeah, Manu, I'm glad you caught up with Senator Cornyn, one of the Republican leaders. Less than a ringing endorsement of what we heard from the president over the weekend. Manu Raja, Jim Acosta, guys, thanks very much. And Jim will stand by for that White House briefing. We'll have live coverage. Also happening right now, the Senate Judiciary Committee grilling the Deputy Attorney General nominee, Rod Rosenstein, Maryland's top federal prosecutor, Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, questioning the nominee right now. President Trump nominated him to be Jeff Sessions' second in command over at the Justice Department, and with Sessions now recusing himself from any investigations involving Russia's interfering in the 2016 presidential election here in the United States, Rosenstein is, if confirmed, would now be in charge of that investigation. But things got heated for a moment when Minnesota Senator Al Franken said Sessions needs to come back before the Judiciary Committee and explain himself. Listen to this exchange.
For me to make sure that you clearly understand this obligation, and you do understand this obligation, right?
I believe I do, Senator.
Okay. I think Senator Sessions should come back. I think he owes it to this committee to come back and to explain himself. Because he also says in his letter, may I just... I will not, this will be very short. He says, let's see, I did not mention communications I had with the Russian ambassador over the years because the question did not ask about them. I asked him what he would do as Attorney General if it was true that members of the campaign had met with the Russians. So he says, I did not mention communications I had with the Russian ambassador over the years because the question did not ask about them. He answered a question I didn't ask. And for him to put this in his letter as a response is insulting. And he should come back and explain himself, Mr. Chairman. I think he owes that to us. Because this appears to me like he was, and I've bent over backward, not to say that he lied. He needs to come back. I've bent over backward. I have given him the benefit of the doubt, but he has to come back.
Strong words from Senator Al Franken of Minnesota. Our correspondent Jessica Schneider has been watching the hearing for us. Jessica, what more have you learned?
Well, if you could see the tempers starting to flare there, and what would normally be a routine hearing for the number 2 position at the Justice Department became fireworks in that relentless back and forth. Russia and wiretapping at the forefront of that hearing. And really, it was Attorney General Sessions, even though he wasn't there, he's been overshadowing the actual nominee, Rod Rosenstein, by that lingering anger among Democrats. Now, Rosenstein, the career prosecutor, facing relentless questioning about whether or not he'd appoint a special prosecutor. Now that Sessions has recused himself from the investigation into Russia's meddling in the 2016 election, it would be Rosenstein that would be the one in charge. But the longtime prosecutor did dance around numerous questions on whether special counsel is necessary.
This is an historic constitutional moment in our history. So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Rosenstein, will you commit that if you're confirmed, you will not impede or shut down any FBI or Justice Department investigation into Russian efforts to influence the 2016 U.S. presidential election?
Senator, on the issue of foreign interference in American elections, I can assure you that you and I are on the same side. I will certainly support any properly predicated investigation related to interference by the Russians or by anybody else in American elections.
I might say for the record that Attorney General Sessions was asked that same question at his confirmation hearing, and he would not make that same commitment.
So again, the Attorney General front and center there. But of course, Rosenstein will not commit to appointing a special prosecutor. He would only say that he commits to an independent investigation overall. Now, also, Wolf, wiretapping was front and center. Rosenstein was asked about the president's tweets accusing the former president of wiretapping at Trump Tower. Rosenstein stayed away from that and only said it was the president's First Amendment rights to tweet whatever he wants to. Wolf?
All right, Jessica, thank you. Jessica Schneider reporting for us. Coming up, the new Republican health care plan is facing some headwinds, including from inside the Republican Party. We'll ask the Chief Deputy Republican Whip how he plans to get his members all on the same page as the bill makes its way through the House. There he is, Pat McHenry of North Carolina. He's standing by live. Also, take a look at this. Live pictures from the White House briefing room where the press secretary, Sean Spicer, getting ready to give his first on-camera briefing in more than a week. We'll go there live once it begins.